Hello friends, in this video we're going to create the game over screen and the high score functionality. In the end, we're going to have this game over menu that we show after the player dies, and it has the current score and the high score. Let's get started. Currently, when the player dies, nothing really happens. The player is deleted, but other than that the game just keeps going. We want to display a game over screen here, so let's start creating that. That's going to be a new scene that we're going to have inside of our UI layer. So let's create a new scene. This is going to be a user interface scene, so we're going to have a control node here as the root node. I'm going to rename this to be the game over screen. And let's save this inside of our scenes folder. We're going to set this to be full rect. And in here, we're going to create some user interface nodes. Firstly, I want to create a color rect here. And I'm going to make this full rect as well. And set the color to be black. I'm going to set the alpha to be like 125. And I'm going to go back to the game scene and instance a game over screen here inside of my UI layer. So when the game ends, I want the game over screen to pop up and I want everything else to be kind of tinted black. So that's why I created this semi-transparent color rect here. Okay, next up, I want to create a panel here. This is going to be in the center. So let's set the anchor preset to be center. I'm going to make this larger, about this size. And I want to go into the theme overrides here to styles and create a new style box flat. This will let me pick a custom color for my panel, and I'm going to make it a bluish color, more like a cyan, I guess. Let's increase the saturation. And that looks fine. I'm also going to give it a corner radius of 25 pixels for each corner so that the corners are nice and rounded like this. And that's going to be it for my design for the panel. Feel free to, mess with this more. And inside of this panel, we're going to create a couple of labels and a button. So firstly, let's create the game over label. We're going to rename this to be game over. And I'm going to put this at the center top. Let's create some label settings here. Let's give it some text, game over. We're going to make the font size much bigger, but first let's set the font to be the Kenny Future font. And then let's start increasing the size. 45 seems to be good. Maybe 46. Okay, 46 seems good. Let's move it down a little. Okay. Next up, I'm just going to duplicate this label. And this one is going to be the score label. Let's see. Let's put the high score first. So this is going to be the high score. I'm going to anchor this to the center and move it up above a little. So the text is going to be high score equals 9999. We, of course, want the label settings to be different, so I'm going to right-click on it and make it unique because we duplicated this. If you don't do that, when you make a change to the label settings, it's also going to affect the game over's label settings. I'm going to make the font size smaller here, maybe 32. 36. Let's try 35. 34. Okay, that looks fine. Let's duplicate this as well, and this one is going to be the score. And I'm going to put this a little bit below the high score. And instead of saying high score, this will be just score. And I'm going to align this to the center. I'm also going to align the high score to the center as well. Okay, I'm actually going to maybe move these slightly up like that. And I'm going to make the panel smaller. I feel like it's a bit too large, but not like that. Like that maybe. And then, of course, I should move these down a little. Okay. Finally, we want to create a button here. So let's do that. Let's create a button. And this is going to be the restart button. We're gonna put this at the center as well and move it down. And this is gonna say retry. Let's say retry. That's a better word than restart. And we need to go into the theme overrides here and give this a bigger font size and a font. So the font size is going to be 32, maybe 35. And let's also make the button bigger as well, like this. Okay, that looks good. Okay, what else? I still want to make the panel smaller, so maybe like this, and put this in the center again, and move it up a little bit more. And let's also put the high score and the score down like that. Let's see. I'm gonna make the game over label bigger, 48, let's say, maybe 52. And let's make the panel wider. Okay, I'm getting a little OCD here, and I'm gonna stop. Okay, that looks fine. So this will be the game over screen. We're also gonna create a script here. Put this in the scripts folder. Inside of here, we basically want to create two different functions to set the high score and the score. We also want to connect the restart button's pressed signal. So let's start by doing that. And so this signal will be emitted each time the button is pressed. And when that button is pressed, we're gonna reload the current scene. Simple. And like I said, we also want to create some functions to set the high score and the score. So first I'm going to create some references here. Actually, I'm not going to create references. I'm just going to create the functions. Set score, let's say. This will access the score node, just like this, and set the text to be score equals string value. And for the high score, we're going to do the same thing, but the function name is going to be different. And we're going to access the high score instead of the score there. Okay, so this will be the game over script. Now we simply want to use this inside of the game scene. So in here, if we play the game now, we will immediately see the game over screen, which is not what we want. So let's set this game over screen to be invisible when the game starts. And when the player dies, we will show it. Inside of the script, when the player dies, do we have a signal for that? Doesn't seem like it. Okay, so we should go into the player script here and create a new signal called killed, or maybe died. Let's say killed, it's fine. And inside of here, let's see, we have a die function, good. So here we can just say killed.emit. Now we can go back to the game script, and here we're connecting the player's signals, good. We'll also connect killed here to onPlayer killed. Let's create this function down here. So when the player is killed, we can basically just set the visible property of the game over screen to be true. So first, let's create a reference to it. I'm just going to shorten this and say GOS for game over screen. And down here, when the player dies, we can simply say GOS.visible equals true. And let's also do an await here and create a timer for 1.5 seconds and wait for its timeout signal. This is just so that we don't show the game over screen immediately after the player dies. We're going to have a 1.5 second delay to create a better game feel. Okay, let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and touch an enemy. And okay, we got an error here. What is going on? Okay, I misspelled create. Let's try this again. Let's see. Okay, let's die. Wait. And the game over screen pops up. Great. The next step is setting the score here. And then the next step will be setting the high score. Okay, to set the score, it's not going to be difficult actually. So before we set visible to true, in fact, before we start waiting, we can say gos.setScore, and we can just set this to be our current score. This way, let me shoot some enemies first before dying. So we have a score of 700. Let's die. And now the score is correct. The next step is going to be setting the high score. The high score is going to be a variable inside of our game script, just like the score variable we have. So underneath this one, let's create a new variable called high score. And each time we kill an enemy, we need to do a check. So if the score is greater than the high score, we're going to set the high score to be the score. So let's say the high score was 100. Each time we kill an enemy, we will check our current score. And if it is greater than 100 in that case, the high score is going to be the current score that we have in this run of the game. And we can stop printing the score here. Okay, so this is okay, but the problem is each time we reload the scene, the high score will be resetted. And even if we, fix that inside of the game, let's say we're keeping the high score in a separate, global script, an autoload script, let's say, a singleton, we would still run into the same problem when we quit the game and launch it again. So we need to save the high score to our file system, to the disk, and load it each time we start the game. To do that, we're going to use the file access API of Godot. So underneath the ready function here, let's create a new function called save game. And in here, we're going to try to open up a file with the file access API, like I said, using the open function. In here, we need to give it a path, and that's going to be user save.data. And then we need to give it a file access mode, and that's going to be write. So this file path here is a special path Godot uses to save data on a user's machine. So this is the path, this user path is the one that you should use whenever you want to save something on the user's computer. Res is the resources folder. It is the file system that we have here. And this one is for the files that you have inside of your project. You shouldn't use this file path to save something on the user's machine. You should use the user path here. And in here, inside of user, we're going to create a file called save.data. File access.open will try to open this file, and because we're trying to open it with write, it will actually delete whatever it's in there and open up a new file. And we can store this file handle in a variable here called save file. And then we're going to say save file store 32 high score. And this function call will store our high score inside of this save file that we just opened up. So because the only thing that we want to store in our game is the high score, we can just, delete whatever was inside of the save file and store this high score value that we have. So this is for saving it, but we also want to load it at the start of the game. And to do that, we're going to do a similar thing. In here, we're going to say save file. We're going to access the file access API again, open the same path, save.data. But this time we're going to use a different mode. This time we're going to try to read it, because read won't delete the file. Write will basically destroy whatever you have here and create a blank new file for you. In fact, we can probably read these inside of the documentation here. Yeah. So read opens the file for read operations. Write opens the file for write operations. It is created if it doesn't exist, which is exactly what we want, because at the first time you play the game, the file won't be there. So write will create it for us, and it will truncate it like you see here. But anyways, let's go back to the game script. And in here, inside of ready, we're trying to open the save data file. And we can check if this worked or not by saying if save file isn't null. So if this works, the save file won't be null. So inside of the if statement, we can just get the Highscore by calling get32 this time instead of store32. So the Highscore that we stored here, we can get it back with get32. And if this file is null, that means we don't have a save file. So this is probably the first time the user is playing the game. Then we can just do a save here. It's not really necessary, but we can just do it to create the file. And then we can set the Highscore to be 0. In fact, we should probably set the Highscore first and then save that. And that will create the file for us. Okay, the last thing we need to do here is when the player dies, we of course want to set the game over screens set Highscore function to the Highscore. And we also want to save the game. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm gonna run the game. So the first time, we should have the save file now, but we should have a Highscore of 0. So when I die, we have a Highscore of 0. That's good. I'm gonna retry and get a Highscore this time of 300. Let's die again. And this time Highscore is 300, but let's see if this stays when I retry. So I'm gonna retry and die again. And as you can see, Highscore is still there. That's good. Let's try beating this Highscore. Let's try getting a higher Highscore. Let's die. This time, as you can see, Highscore is correct again. And let's die one more time to see it there. Okay, that also works. Finally, I'm gonna quit the game and launch it again. And let's see if we still keep the Highscore. As you can see, we do. The Highscore is still there. Great. So that is how to create the Highscore in our game. And that's going to be it for this lecture. In this one, we created the game over screen and we implemented the logic inside of the game scene to show it when the player dies. We also created the Highscore. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to learn Godot, I have a course for beginners where I teach everything you need to know to make games. If that's interesting to you, check the link in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.